Oakley.
All right. Thank you
Oh.
guys for that. Hope everyone doing okay. So welcome to week 2. Could you please turn your cameras on? And just probably you remember. So have you already marked your attendance? I see some of you are there. Okay, cool. All right. So let me see. I'll share the screen. Uh, all right. Let me share the screen. All right. So I hope all of you are doing great. So today we're not going to have a long lecture, but it's very important just to set terms and expectations about what we're going to study in this class. And there are like small things I need to address from last lecture, and then we're going to continue talking about paradigms in social science research and communication research more specifically, although there's no big difference. Before that, so there was one slide that I did not address last time. So before we actually talk about research, I thought there is always a misconception between the difference between opinion pieces, news article, news reports, and technical research. In a way, we in social sciences call research. Um, so in journalism, if you do research on, let's say, for instance, um, India's technological capabilities, and you just report numbers of people enrolling in STEM universities, how many firms, for instance, are outsourcing to India, how many Indians get visas to, let's say, to the United States to work in Silicon Valley. This it still will be called research with a small r, but in a social science sense, we don't qualify it as something like it's a qualitative social science research. We're going to talk more about this uh, later today. But before we get into that, I want to mention like there's another type of academic articles that I personally don't do, but you still need to know about it. And that is to say, research that follow the critical paradigm of so-called critical essays. And those exist whether in the media studies field, in gender studies field, in ethnic studies, in philosophy, in psychology, in different fields actually. And this type of research is totally different actually than the quantitative paradigms in the sense that it's more abstract. And from the title, you would see the word it's called critical. So that is to say, it takes a position for or against something. When you criticize, that's again criticism, by the way, it's not necessarily negative, but criticism means you show the limitations or boundaries of whatever phenomena. And so critical essays in the field of communication studies are philosophical treatments of social phenomena or things people see in the media. So it involves basically reading, so a lot of like tons of reading. So you want to study one specific things, which is let's say the coverage of teenage girls in Teen Vogue. Like, how does Teen Vogue, the magazine, portray and define the roles and role models for teenage girls? Then someone from critical studies would just read tons and tons of like issues and articles from Teen Vogue, and from the position they are taking, whether they're coming from let's say a feminist position, whether they're coming from an anti-capitalist position, whether they're coming from a um, like ethnic studies or ethnic diversity position, they will criticize the discourse that the magazine is constructing about teen girls. And that will involve deep analysis of text, images. It describes the framework by which, so the author would say, I'm coming from a feminist perspective. And not only that, would tell you which philosophers influenced that author, and then present their analysis and their findings. So in that sense, those articles don't, in a technical sense, they don't provide new findings. It's just a new interpretation or a new analysis of a phenomenon. But this type of research doesn't involve analyzing new data, for instance, as we said with quantitative research. And it doesn't have the very clear structure I explained last time, right? So you have to have a method of collection, data analysis, and results. This type of research is mostly you would see a long piece of literature review. And so you would see this difference in depending on which journal you read from communication studies. Um, so that's that. And so now we're actually starting the new lecture. So there is a question that is to say, how do we know what we know? Um, how do you know that the Earth revolves around the sun? Or how do you know that it's going to rain tomorrow? Or how do we know the size of the universe or the age of the sun? Those questions, we arrived at answer to them because we accepted certain frameworks of analysis. Right? That framework of analysis is what we call a paradigm. How many of you, just out of curiosity, how many of you have heard that word before? Paradigm. Okay, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so some of you, it's one of these words that you need like 5 years to fully grasp what it means. But to give you a very simple explanation, so the textbook definition that you will find is a paradigm. And by the way, there are multiple definitions of paradigms. Like every philosopher will jump in to explain what a paradigm is. But a paradigm is a system of organizing thoughts and conceptions about reality. You put, in other words, it involves, first of all, how you define what real is, and then how do we know what is real and what is unreal, what is true, what is untrue, and then the methods by which you're going to investigate reality. Paradigm involves those three things. I wanted to have another slide to explain three things. Part of a paradigm. So a paradigm, and by the way, you don't have to memorize this, but a paradigm involves ontology, epistemology, and a methodology. And to translate that, uh, paradigm basically give you definition. The definition is ontology. What is time? What is space? What is life? What is human? Uh, those are definitions, so conceptions that what is family. We have conceptions about certain constructs around us. And then epistemology is basically the way, is it, can we know reality from observation? So to give you, and we're not going to investigate a lot of time on this, but epistemology means, do you consider reality something to be observable and we can actually know the truth? Or do you consider that there are other sources of truth that go either beyond the senses or even through some, let's say, mystical way of acquiring knowledge, right? So mystics, for instance, have what we would call a different paradigm or a different epistemology. Mystics of, you know what who mystics are, by the way? Speaking of, uh, so I'm sure you're familiar with religions, right? So since this is a Catholic, but so for instance, in religion, let me give you a very simple example. In any religion, you have an epistemology of saying like, we can know part of the truth or the whole truth or however you want to define it. We can produce knowledgeable claims by things other than material observation, right? So whether we're talking about Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, all of them share that. At least we could know that there's another reality beyond the material reality we live in currently, right? And so this is a paradigm. So you would believe within that framework that, okay, part of reality, or whether it's about ethics or behavior, comes from something other than our material senses. Whereas in science, uh, the paradigm we would follow is what I mentioned last time is the empirical paradigm, right? Uh, and in the empirical paradigm, or also known, sometimes you hear like the quantitative social science paradigm, it's built upon the idea that if things are not observable, if things are not testable, then they won't be part of science, right? Solely about science. So we're talking here about science, regardless of other things. But if we're talking science, science would means the way to acquire knowledge is through testable and sensible things. And anything falls beyond the purview of that falls outside the purview of science. Is that clear? So that's the paradigm. That's the main point. So paradigm is a model, and once you accept that, then the ways of researching things would follow. So if you already established that, then any phenomenon you're going to study, you would stick to things that you can test and observe, and not other things that you won't be aware. So that's one paradigm. So there are three major paradigms in the field of communication studies, and even in social sciences as well. So we have the quantitative, interpretive, and critical. And I'm going to a little bit. Um, so the quantitative has different terms. So sometimes it's called quantitative, sometimes it's called the empirical, and sometimes it's called the positivist. Um, so positivism, or the positive paradigm, believe has certain core beliefs that then define the conception of reality. Um, so first one, it's like we have universal truth and laws. That is to say, what is true in this planet, and this would get tricky. But let me give you a simpler example. Um, when we're talking about universal truth, that means the law of physics would work everywhere in the universe, right? That's the positivist position. Things that are real right now were also real would also be real thousand of years ago, million of years ago, 100 million years ago. The laws of the universe are uniform and they are static. So the laws of the universe never change. That's what hence the word universal. doesn't change from one place to another. So if that is the case, then researcher would can seek objectivities, because if you have established laws and rules for the universe, and by the way, when we're talking about the universe, we're not talking about physics. We're talking about physics, human beings. So that will involve modern society, study of history, studies of nations, all of that, right? You would seek objectivity. Can someone, I'm sure you've heard the word objective before, right? Do you know what objective means? Okay, can someone explain to us what objective means? Like, or being objective. What does being objective means?
It means that you're not influenced or like you're not persuaded by like personal feelings and opinions.
So you can separate your personal feelings from your investigation. Is that what you're saying, Jay?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I am surprised. Yes, I am.
Oh, sorry.
You're all right. Sorry. You're fine.
Okay. So yeah. So that's one. So your personal feelings would have, or your personal beliefs should have nothing to do with the investigation you're doing. Right? At least that's the goal, right? Um, so, and that's follow the word to be research is external. And to put it bluntly, it's just saying reality doesn't care about your feelings in a way. So the reality of things does not depend on your personal experience. And so that is to say, the effect of any phenomena is true whether you believe in it or not. Okay. Um, and the last point, like it's based on deductive and quantitative methods, similar to the natural science model. We're going to take about deduction and quantitative methods this week and next week. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this specific point, but you know this that the point is the positivist paradigm is designed after the natural science paradigm. So it's a belief that we can treat social sciences or human sciences the same way we treat the natural sciences. So we can study psychology and sociology and communication, or human communication specifically, the same way we study physics and chemistry, right? Um, the critical and interpretive paradigms, on the other hand, believe on multiple realities. Probably you've heard that, and not in a metaphysical sense. Then, not like there's another universe that's parallel to our universe, but they believe that a reality, as a matter of fact, can be experienced differently, and that is to say, different groups with opposing views could have equal claims to reality, right? So you see reality is a way you cannot, in according to this paradigm, you cannot differentiate experience from external reality. Uh, so Ray, any investigation you go into uh, would then your personal feelings and predisposition will affect the way you talk about it and interpret it, whether you know it or not, right? So that's what the critical and interpretive paradigm both share. And so if that is the case, then the role of the researcher is to explore and present as many different experiences of reality as possible. So you see how when I say it's a system of understanding the universe and how to know the reality. So you have in all of these paradigms one basic premise, and then following that basic premise, it will then come how would you define and seek reality. Because if you believe there are different realities, then there's no way for you then to present something that you would call objective reality, because you already said that multiple realities. Then your role, you would think your role as a researcher is to find different interpretations, and you would focus on what you would call representation. That is to say, you look at different groups of people, whether like based like ethnic groups, linguistic groups, religious groups, gender groups, etc., and try to present those views into the table against the prominent paradigm by which you would show people would have different perceptions about reality. So those are two different contrasting paradigms actually, and they existed both in the social sciences. Um, they don't have to be in conflict, by the way, but most researchers would feel more comfortable in one paradigm than the other. Are things clear up to this point, or I'm being too abstract? Right? Let me give you. I have actually examples right here, but I can give you another one that I just thought of. So imagine, let's say you're interested in studying religious experiences, right? Okay, in whatever group. So that is to say, we went to a village in rural Mexico, and we went to investigate. Like some villagers claim they can have communication with the spirits, right? Um, so here, the positive paradigm we just report what would that experience, what effects would that experience have, let's say, if you're interested in communication, on the roles of different authorities within that village, right? So does it make people happy? Does it make them sad, right? You will think about only focus on things that are observable. But whether those spirits are real or imaginary is something that you would never investigate, because you would think this falls outside the purview of science. Like we cannot actually investigate, because we cannot investigate spiritual aspects objectively, then it's not something that science can or should investigate. So you would only investigate like, does that experience have like any economic effects or social effects or psychological effects, things that you can measure and test, but not any other thing. Uh, so that, but if you're from a critical point of view, and this actually has been done, you would actually engage with that experience, assuming as if it's true. So that is to say, if I, for a moment, just imagine myself being part of those native villagers and try to see the reality the way they see it, not the way I originally see, or the I personally, but the way I see it. And once I immerse myself in that experience, I can produce a different conception of reality than what me and my readers are familiar with. So if that difference clear, like you see how, like two, okay, right. All right. Uh, for this class, so personally speaking, because the way I've been trained and the way I studied, I personally follow the quantitative social science paradigm, or the empirical paradigm, or positive paradigm. That we have a reality and it can be discovered by the investigator or the knower, and you can actually detach yourself from the topic and present objective findings, only and only if you follow a systematic mechanism. That you follow the steps of the scientific methods, and that would allow you to arrive at objective reality. The goal of all of this is to provide theories that explain the relationship between different variables from the topic of investigating. Whether we're studying, let's say, health communication, whether we're studying human relationship, whether we're studying effects of social media, we know that these constructs we're talking about are real, and we can establish theories that explain them, that are backed by data and very sound statistical analysis. So I think I basically went over this, and we're going to talk more about it in the coming. But so we explained what objectivity is. Reproducibility, I think it's sort of self-explanatory that if someone repeat the same investigation, they would arrive at the same results. So if I present an investigation saying people who play video games before going to bed have worse sleep patterns or unhealthy sleeping patterns, right? If I followed the right methods, then anyone who would repeat the investigation should arrive at the same results, right? So that's what we mean by reproducibility. Empiricity, the same, is that you would have methods about that can measure the things effectively. So when we measure dissatisfaction or like sleep disturbance, we offer like a clear standard or a clear scale of how we measured it, right? It becomes empirical. It's something anyone can do. Falsifiability, and I know I skipped it, but I'm going back to it again because it's important. Uh, what do we mean? So forget about falsifiability. Just focus on the verb falsify. What does falsify means? To falsify something. What would that mean to you?
Basically, it would just try, like, you would try to prove something is wrong or false.
Okay. Anna, did you want to say something?
Oh, that's what I was gonna add. Yeah.
Okay. So you want to make something, yeah, like you want to show something being false. So in science, believe it or not, we actually try to prove our hypotheses to be false. And if something is not falsifiable, it is not scientific. And now you might find this somewhat counterintuitive. But when we mean by falsifiable is that, and you can apply this to any claim you hear. If you don't show me how I can prove you wrong, then you're not offering a scientific claim. Let me explain. Suppose I say, my daughter is the cutest girl in the world. Okay. How would you, can anyone falsify that? Like what is cuteness, right? And like, okay, in the world, like, yeah, if you think your daughter is the cutest girl in the world, then yeah, but it's not something that we could really test because you made what we would call a subjective statement and not an objective statement. You think your daughter is the cutest girl, and that is true. You think that. It is true that you think that, right? To you, it is true. But it's not something that is objective, and that's something that is like external. It's not something in which we can separate the subjectivity of the person from the objective reality. So you see where paradigms comes in, right? So it's different. Whereas if I say, my daughter is, let's say, the smartest person in math, right? Or like the best in math among her peers. Is that something we can falsify? How would we falsify it?
Yes, because you have like you could have math scores and like homework tests, like actual data.
Yeah. So we would say then, okay, then let's have a nationwide or a worldwide math test, and we would see how would your daughter scores. And if she scores below anyone, or like if she doesn't get the full score, then she's not the best person in math, period. Regardless of what you think. Like, but that's something we can falsify. And so in sciences, theories have to be falsified, right? And it's also a communication. Like you cannot just make up claims. If I and just to talk about example related to communication, so I'll talk about my niche. If I say celebrity endorsements are effective in selling products, that's a claim, can be true or not. But before we know if it's true or not true, we have to try to falsify it. It is falsifiable. If I run a campaign led by celebrity endorsers and it doesn't produce positive results, then I would know, okay, I falsified the claim. Or vice versa, we try to falsify it, but it still holds. Then we would know it's positively true or like it is supported. So remember this, because weeks and weeks from now, when we're going to get about talk about hypothesis testing in survey and experimental research, we would actually run statistics to show that our hypothesis is false. And actually we reject the idea that it's false or not, and not that if it's true or not. This one gets complicated, but we can only know if things are false or not. You cannot really know if things are true. And this is too complicated. So I'll leave that for a later day, but it will make sense later. So I think I've already explained this. So a paradigm methodology approach by which one observe, collect data. And so I talked about ontology, epistemology, and methodology. So ontology is basically definitions. So in our field, when we talk about ontology, there are different concepts we deal with. So when we talk about persuasion, you have to provide a definition of what persuasion is. When we talk about parasocial interaction, that you define what parasocial interaction is. When you talk about motivation, you define what motivation is. So those are ontological things. You provide definitions. You're still not testing it by data. And then I already talked about epistemology. Like, are you following a positivist or a constructivist paradigm? And methodology is just procedures, which we're going to teach in this class. So do you do surveys? Do you do personal interview? Do you know immerse anthropological experience? Do you do social media analytics? Things like that, right? So that's what we mean by methodology, which is method is the title of our class, but methodology is solely interested in how you collect the data, practically speaking. So that's how it is different than epistemology. Yes, Jarrett.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. Is objectivity always changing as like we figure out more things about the universe?
Yes, the short answer is yes. So in that way, So for instance, if we, so the objective, so anyone, for instance, is studying the universe, let's say studying astrophysics, right? You're coming from the assumption that the universe is 13.7 billion years old, right? And until that changes by a new discovery, everyone will just start their research from there. Whether they want to talk about different planets or different galaxies. That's the objective reality as of today. If then you have another empirical research that produces different results, and we found is actually more supported than the current objective reality, then that would be the new objective reality. Then yeah. All right. Okay. So that's overall. So that's today is going to be the most abstract day because we want to set boundaries. But for this class, we're just going to talk. We're just going to focus on two methodological approaches. So these are not epistemological approaches. These are methodological approaches. Although each one is more wedded to one paradigm than the other. So there are two methodologies. One is called qualitative research and the other is quantitative research. And so qualitative research is more about the what, why, and how questions, or like the why and who questions. So in qualitative research, you want to describe things. So it's closer to the interpretive paradigm. So if you have exploratory research, that is to say, how you guys feel about the vaccine? That's my research question. And I just want to collect and hear different viewpoints about the vaccine as it's understood by college students. Then I'm just producing qualitative research. So I want to hear different opinion. I want to know your feelings. I want to know your plans. I want to know things about your families, your parents. Did your parents take the vaccine? Do you plan to take the vaccine? These are things that are qualitative. If I'm just hearing, I want to hear your point of view or hear your perspective, I'm doing qualitative research. Right? So it's used for exploratory, so research that you want to just start exploring the topic. And the goal of it is to discover emerging themes. So after I talked with you about the vaccination program, different themes emerge. Or by different themes, I mean like different, like specific concepts stood out from my conversation. So let's say most of you talked about safety or returning back to going back to normal, or like about fear. So those themes, larger themes, emerge from our conversation, or like would emerge from. Whereas quantitative reality, quantitative research is more about quantifying, and just to reuse our own example, if I'm running quantitative research on the same topic about vaccines, so I would simply ask, how many of you plan to take the vaccine? Then I get numbers like 70% yes, 30% no. And then I compare relationship between different measures. So, okay, so 70% want to take the vaccine. So let's look at what percentages are male and female, right? Or like different ethnic groups, whites and whites, or like different income levels, or like different personality traits, or like maybe connecting, talking about communication, connecting the attitude toward the vaccine and your social media habits. So it could be people who watch more YouTube videos would express higher skepticism towards the vaccine. Right. So this is a question that we can actually quantify. So I can look at the percentages here viewing YouTube and percentages of rejecting the vaccine and see if there's a correlation, right? So that's what quantitative research does. And some of the methods that we exist in quantitative research. So you'll do surveys. That's pretty straightforward. You get answers from people. Data analytics, and analytics is like when you go to like let's say Facebook and like collect likes and shares and comments and all of that. Analytics about the performance of anything online or broadcast or what have you. Network analysis, which looks at the connections between different actors in society. Experimental research, content analysis, conversation analysis. Those are things that are quantitative. So this part actually, so the interpretive paradigm, I'm just going to skip that. Right, so qualitative research. As for the qualitative research, we would conduct, so things that we'll do in qualitative research are interviews, open-ended surveys, and you know what open-ended questions are, right? Open-ended. So questions, and then you can type in, yeah, whatever your answer is. Okay. Ethnographic observation, rhetorical analysis, and also content analysis. So in this class, we're only going to focus on 3 things for qualitative research. Actually, technically 4 or 3.5. Let me see. So we're gonna do a little bit on interviews, a little bit on focus groups, and interviews and focus groups are very similar. Ethnographic research, also a little bit. And content analysis is unique that in a sense that it can be both. It can be qualitative or quantitative, depending on what the researcher wants to know. Right? So content analysis is both qualitative and quantitative. And from quantitative research, we're going to look at survey research and experimental research. So we're having like 3 methods from qualitative and 2 methods from quantitative, but most of our time will go towards the quantitative side for 2 reasons, because that's the one I'm more familiar with, and also this class counts as a requirement for quantitative reasoning, so it's more focused on quantitative than qualitative. So here is, I think we can talk about this next time. So right, so I think I'll stop here. Do you have any questions? Okay, cool. So I'll see you next time. Yeah, but before you leave, please check the discussion board. So I revised and the question that's been posted. So I gave, some people were struggling with finding articles, so I posted a few links that could help you. So please read it. So I'm simply asking you, show me an article or a blog post that's talking about an academic research that interests you. And the whole idea is just to find what you guys find interesting, and then we can discuss about it. So yeah, so please check the discussion board and do the readings. And yeah, see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, I had a quick question.
Yes, Fernando.
So I was checking on Blackboard the assignment number 1 for individual assignments, and the due date, it says August 31st, 2020. I just wanted to see when that was actually due.
Yeah, it's due week 4. So
Okay.
you know what? I'm going to change it right now. I always forget to do it. Like I think you told me this last time.
Yeah.
Yeah.